In the shadow of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains, a war is about to erupt in the heart of America's farmland. The Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's most brutal criminal empire, has set their sights on peaceful Thunder Valley, seeing nothing but a simple farmer defending worthless land. They couldn't be more wrong. Wade Thorne isn't just another aging rancher with a rusty tractor and calloused hands. For 27 years, he was Shadowmaker, the most decorated Delta Force operative in U.S. Special Forces history. His missions still remain classified, his methods still taught at Fort Bragg. The cartel thinks they're about to seize another helpless farm. Instead, they're walking into a trap set by a legend who specialized in making entire enemy battalions disappear. This isn't just another land grab. This is the story of how the world's deadliest cartel learned that some old soldiers don't retire. They just find new battlefields. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over Thunder Valley as Wade Thorne walked his property line, his German Shepherd Atlas padding silently beside him. Frost crunched beneath his boots, each step deliberate and measured. Old habits that had kept him alive through 3 decades of combat. At 62, he still moved with the fluid grace of a much younger man, his weathered face betraying nothing of the lethal skills beneath the farmer's facade. The morning routine never varied. Check the perimeter, survey the approaches, note any changes in the landscape. To his neighbors, it looked like a rancher inspecting his fences. To Wade, it was a security sweep, just like the thousands he'd conducted in places that didn't officially exist. Atlas suddenly stiffened, ears forward. Wade froze mid-step, his hand instinctively moving toward the concealed holster beneath his work jacket. Through the morning mist, he spotted the cause. Fresh tire tracks cutting through his east. Field. Heavy vehicles. Commercial-grade tires. Definitely not local farm equipment. What do you think, boy? Wade muttered, kneeling to examine the impressions. Atlas growled softly in response. The tracks were fresh, made sometime during the night. 3 vehicles, consistent spacing, organized movement, not random trespassers. This was reconnaissance. Inside his renovated farmhouse, behind the rustic exterior and beneath the carefully maintained appearance of rural simplicity, Wade had built something very different. The basement, officially a root cellar on county records, housed a command center that would have impressed his old Delta Force teammates. Surveillance feeds covered every approach to the property. Motion sensors, hidden cameras, and tactical communications gear, all disguised as ordinary farm equipment. Wade poured his coffee into a battered thermos, watching his security feeds. The vehicles that had scouted his property overnight were black SUVs, cartel standard. They'd been appearing more frequently in Thunder Valley over the past month. 3 farms had already sold under mysterious circumstances. 2 more had suffered accidents when the owners refused to sell. Sarah Bennett's ancient pickup truck appeared on his monitors, kicking up dust on the access road. His closest neighbor and one of the few people who suspected there was more to the quiet farmer than met the eye. Wade switched off the security feeds as she pulled up. "Wade!" Sarah called out, climbing down from her truck. At 45, she ran the most successful horse breeding operation in the valley. More importantly, she had a network of contacts that kept her informed about everything that happened in 3 counties. "Did you hear about the Hendersons?" "Missing my morning gossip session," Wade replied, maintaining his simple farmer persona. But his mind was already processing the tactical implications. The Hendersons' farm controlled the valley's main water supply. They're gone, packed up in the middle of the night, left everything behind. Sarah's hands gripped her coffee mug tightly. "And this morning, there were men at their place. Not local, black SUVs, suits that cost more than my truck." Wade nodded, his expression carefully neutral. The cartel was moving faster now, getting bolder. They were systematically taking control of key properties throughout the valley. His farm would be next, the last piece they needed to control all. Access to Thunder Valley. "Be careful, Wade," Sarah said quietly. "These aren't ordinary land developers. Miller tried to stand up to them last month. Next day, his barn burned down. Week after that, his wife's car crashed on a straight road with no witnesses." "I appreciate the warning," Wade replied, playing his role of the simple farmer. But behind the facade, decades of combat experience were shifting into gear. The cartel was establishing a forward operating base, using the farms for distribution. Points. His land was the missing piece in their network. As Sarah drove away, Wade whistled for Atlas and headed toward his barn. Inside, beneath the ordinary tools and farm equipment, lay another hidden room. Old paranoia, his friends had called it. Wade called it preparation. He lifted the false floorboard, revealing a cache of equipment he'd hoped never to use again. Weapons, tactical gear, communications equipment, everything he'd need if things went south. "Getting too old for this, boy," Wade told Atlas, who sat watching him with intelligent eyes, but they both knew that wasn't true. You didn't survive 27 years in Delta Force by getting slow. You survived by staying ready, by turning every environment into a potential battlefield. Above him, another vehicle approached on the main road. Wade checked his monitors. The same black SUVs from last night, moving slowly past his gate. Reconnaissance, marking their next target. They saw an aging farmer, an isolated property, an easy mark. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Thunder Valley's sheriff, Mike Cooper, looked out of place in Wade's kitchen. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, but his eyes carried the weight of a man watching his community slip through his fingers. 7 farms in the past month, Cooper said, staring into his untouched coffee. All bought by shell companies. Those who refuse to sell have accidents, and I can't prove a damn thing. Wade leaned against his counter, appearing every bit the simple farmer seeking advice. "Heard? The Hendersons left last night. More like fled." Cooper's fist tightened, left everything behind. Their daughter's college photos still on the walls. Who does that unless they're terrified? Through his window, Wade watched another black SUV cruise past his property. Third time today. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. "Mexican. Cartel," Cooper continued. "We know it. FBI knows it, but they're smart. Everything looks legitimate on paper. Local judges are either bought or scared. Even got some state politicians in their pocket." Wade's secure phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an old contact in federal law enforcement. "Cartel moving hard and fast. El Coyote himself is running this operation. Watch your back, El Coyote." Wade kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. The cartel's most brutal enforcer, known for making examples of those who resisted. This wasn't just about drug distribution anymore. This was about sending a message. "Had some visitors yourself, I hear," Cooper said carefully. "Men in suits making offers?" "Nothing I can't handle, Mike." The sheriff stood, adjusting his gun belt. "Wade, I've known you 10 years. Never asked about your past. Never wanted to know why a man with your capabilities chose to farm in Thunder Valley. But these people, they're different. They don't just kill you, they destroy everything you care about first." After Cooper left, Wade activated his secure communication system, 3 calls to numbers that didn't officially exist. Each answered on the first ring. "Go 6, a gruff voice belonging to Knox, his former sniper. "Note supposedly retired in Idaho. It's Phantom. Remember that favor you owe me?" A low whistle. "Must be serious if you're calling that in." "How bad?" "Cartels moving into the valley. El Coyote's running the operation. Silence on the line. Then, Jesus, give me 12 hours. The second call went to Raven, their demolitions expert. The third to Shadow, their communications specialist. Each response was immediate, without hesitation. In less than 24 hours, his old team would be assembled. Sarah's truck appeared again, moving faster than usual. Wade met her at the gate. "They're at Miller's place," she said, face pale. "At least 20 men. Pulling everything out of his house, looking for something. Miller's wife is hysterical." Wade's tactical mind processed the implications. The cartel was searching for evidence, documents, anything that could expose their operation, which meant they were ready to move from acquisition to implementation. His security system pinged. 3 more SUVs approaching, these ones moving with military precision. Wade recognized the formation. Rolling command center lead and follow vehicles for protection. "Sarah, go home. Stay there. Whatever you hear tonight, whatever happens, don't come out." She grabbed his arm. "Wade, what are you going to do?" He gave her the same gentle smile he'd worn for 10 years of neighborly conversations. "Just going to have a chat with some folks about property values." As Sarah's truck disappeared down the road, Wade entered his command center. On the monitors, he could see the SUVs stopping at his gate. 8 men emerged, moving with the practiced coordination of ex-military. Their leader wore an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the shoulder holster underneath. Atlas took his position by Wade's side, silent and alert. Together, they watched the men approach his front door. "Well, boy," Wade said quietly, "looks like retirement's over." The cartel was about to learn why his Delta Force call sign had been Phantom. Because like a ghost, he could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish before the enemy knew what hit them. And Thunder Valley. It was about to become their worst nightmare. As Wade watched the cartel's advance team through his security feeds, his mind drifted to another time, another operation. Kandahar, 2002. His Delta Force team, surrounded by Taliban forces, outnumbered 15-1. Everyone had called it a suicide mission. Wade had called it Tuesday. He checked his weapons now with the same methodical precision he'd used then. Each movement automatic, perfected through decades of combat experience. The Glock 19 under his work jacket. The M4 carbine, hidden in his tractor's false compartment. Simple tools for a farmer, lethal instruments in the right hands. You know what they used to say about Phantom? He'd once overheard a young operator ask at Fort Bragg. "He doesn't fight battles. He ends wars before they begin." The memory brought a grim smile. They'd never understood that his real talent wasn't combat, it was strategy, making the enemy defeat themselves. His secure phone chirped, updates from his team, 2 hours out. Knox, got the gear, moving fast. Raven, communications grid ready. Shadow Wade moved to his barn's hidden armory, Atlas following silently. The space looked exactly like a root cellar, until you knew which support beam to press. The false wall slid away, revealing enough firepower to wage a small war. Kandahar hadn't been his most dangerous mission. That honor belonged to Venezuela, 2010. A cartel operation, much like this one. They'd taken over an entire town, using civilians as shields. The CIA said it was impossible to extract their asset without massive casualties. Wade's team had done it in 6 hours. No civilians harmed, no shots fired. The cartel never even knew they were there. "Remember that one, boy?" Wade asked Atlas, checking the seals on his body armor. "Sometimes the best weapon isn't a gun. It's making your enemy see exactly what you want them to see." His surveillance system tracked the cartel team's movement. Their formation was professional, but sloppy, overconfident. They'd done this too many times without resistance. Myanmar, 2015. His last official mission. Warlord's fortress, supposed to be impregnable. 3,000 guards, state-of-the-art security. The Joint Chiefs wanted a full assault. Wade had another idea. 24 hours later, the warlord surrendered himself. His own men had turned against him, convinced their fortress was haunted by demons. All it took was some careful planning, precise timing, and the right kind of fear. Wade activated his farm's defensive systems. Motion sensors disguised as irrigation equipment, cameras hidden in weathered fence posts, coverage zones that looked random to the untrained eye but would funnel any attackers exactly where he wanted them. "Sir!" The radio crackled with Knox's voice. "We're seeing vehicle movement on the back roads, lots of it." Wade checked his thermal imaging, multiple convoys approaching from different directions. El Coyote wasn't taking chances. He was bringing his full force. How many? "Count 40 vehicles so far, military grade. These aren't street thugs." Good. The more professional they were, the more predictable they'd become. Professionals followed patterns. Patterns could be exploited. Wade thought of Sarah, of the Hendersons, of every family in Thunder Valley living in fear. He remembered another valley in Afghanistan, where villagers had thanked him with tears in their eyes after his team removed. A Taliban stronghold without firing a shot. Some battles, his first commander had told him, are won before the enemy knows they're fighting. The cartel thought they were about to seize another helpless farm. Instead, they were walking into an operation planned by a man who'd spent his life making superior forces defeat themselves. His phone buzzed again. A message from his CIA contact. "El Coyote's coming personally. He doesn't leave survivors." Wade smiled, checking his watch. 1 hour until his team arrived. 2 hours until darkness. The cartel was bringing everything they had, committed to, making an example of the old farmer who dared to resist. "Ready for one last dance, boy?" he asked Atlas, who stood alert beside him. The shepherd's ears were forward, sensing his master's shift from farmer to warrior. Through his monitors, Wade watched the cartel's advance team reach his front porch. Time to play his role. Time to be the simple farmer they expected. Time to begin the operation that would dismantle an entire cartel using nothing but a remote farm and decades of combat experience. Some called him Phantom because he struck without warning. Others because he could appear anywhere. But the real reason was simpler. By the time you realized what he was, it was already too late. Wade opened his front door before they could knock, a calculated move that threw off their rhythm immediately. 5 men in expensive suits, trying too hard to look like legitimate businessmen. 3 more by the vehicles, hands suspiciously close. "To concealed weapons, Mr. Thorne." The leader stepped forward, expensive watch glinting in the morning sun. "I'm Miguel Reyes. We represent an investment group interested in agricultural properties in this region." Wade played his role perfectly, the aging farmer, slightly overwhelmed by city folks in suits. Every gesture carefully crafted to make them underestimate him. "Bit early for business calls, isn't it?" Reyes smiled, all white teeth and cold eyes. "Opportunities don't wait, Mr. Thorne. May we come in? Discuss some numbers that might interest you?" Wade's tactical assessment was instant and automatic. 2 men moving toward his barn, trying to be subtle, one by the gate with a radio, military stance. Reyes himself, the way he moved, screamed Special Forces training, probably Mexican Marines before going private sector. "Coffee's fresh," Wade said, stepping aside. Let them think they were in control. Inside, Reyes went straight to business. $5 million, Mr. Thorne. Cash, more than generous for a property this size. Wade poured coffee with deliberate slowness. Through his kitchen window, he watched the 2 men by his barn checking sightlines, defensive positions, not real. Estate investors. Advanced team mapping the property for an assault. "Not interested in selling," Wade said simply. "Land's been in my family too long." Reyes's smile tightened slightly. "Perhaps I wasn't clear. This valley is changing, Mr. Thorne. Progress, you might say. You can be part of that change and profit from it, or... Wade's voice remained calm, even as he noted the subtle shift in the men's positions. Standard intimidation formation. Or you might find this valley becoming very unwelcoming. Accidents happen, especially to stubborn old men who don't know when. To take a good deal." Wade straightened slowly, allowing just a hint of steel to enter his voice. "Sounds like a threat, Mr. Reyes. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Reyes's face at the use of his name, a name Wade shouldn't have known. A calculated slip to let them know he wasn't as ignorant as he appeared. One of the men by the barn called out in Spanish about security cameras. Wade had let them spot the obvious ones, hiding his real surveillance system much more carefully. "Think about it," Reyes said, producing a business card. "You have 24 hours. After that, the offer becomes significantly less generous," Atlas growled softly from his position by Wade's feet. Reyes glanced down, smile turning cruel. "Beautiful dog. German Shepherd, yes? Would be a shame if something happened to him." Wade kept his hand gentle on Atlas's head, but his voice carried the weight of 3 decades of combat experience. "That would be a very serious mistake." Something in his tone made Reyes hesitate. The mask slipped for just a moment, and Wade saw genuine surprise. They had expected an easy mark, a simple farmer they could bully or buy. Instead, they'd caught a glimpse of something else, something that set off warning bells. The cartel men retreated to their vehicles, trying to maintain their confident swagger. Wade watched them drive away, already planning his next moves. His phone buzzed. A text from Knox. 4 hours out. Teams assembled. Wade typed back. "Make it 3. Companies. Already knocking." Wade's team arrived like shadows at dusk, their vehicles appearing from different directions, using old techniques to avoid surveillance. Knox's black pickup came first, followed by Raven in a weathered Jeep. Shadow arrived last, his van loaded, with communications equipment disguised as farm machinery. 20 years melted away as they gathered in Wade's barn. Knox, his sniper, carried his custom rifle case like it was part of him. Raven brought enough explosives to level a small town, all carefully concealed in construction equipment cases. Shadow's gear looked civilian, but could crack military grade. "Encryption, just like old times," Knox said, his voice gruff but warm. "Though usually we had government backing." "Government would just slow us down," Raven replied, already examining the barn's structure. "Nice setup, Wade. Good sight lines. Multiple escape routes." Wade spread a detailed map across his workbench. "Cartel's been systematic, taking key properties, establishing distribution routes. They're not just running drugs, they're setting up a permanent operation." Shadow connected his laptop, bringing up intercepted communications. "They're professional, ex-military in their ranks, mostly Mexican special forces. But they're arrogant, sloppy with their security." "How many are we dealing with?" Knox asked, examining the terrain through the barn. "Door. Main force is 30 men." Wade pointed to marked locations. 2 separate groups. First team's the muscle. They handle intimidation, arson, accidents. Second team's their professionals, actual combat experience. "Kill zones are perfect," Knox observed. "Natural bottleneck here, high ground advantage. We can funnel them right where we want them." "They'll come in force," Wade warned. "No more pretense of being businessmen. They've got heavy weapons, armor, probably air support." "Good." Raven grinned, pulling out his demolition plans. "Been a while since we had a proper fight." Wade looked at each man, these warriors who'd come running at his call. "Why'd you really come?" Nash spoke first. "Remember Kosovo? That village we found after the militia went through? Some things you can't walk away from. Some fights need fighting." "Cartels took my cousin's farm in Texas," Raven added, checking detonator wires. "By the time anyone could do anything, it was too late. Not happening again. Not here." Knox just shrugged, but his eyes were hard. "You called. That's enough." Shadow looked up from his computer. "They're moving faster than we thought. Intercepted orders. Main force mobilizing for tonight. No warning, no negotiation. Perfect." Wade smiled grimly. "Let's give them a welcome they won't forget." The team dispersed to their positions, each man knowing his role without need for explanation. This wasn't their first impossible mission, just maybe their last one. "Remember," Wade added, his voice carrying the weight of command, "we're not just defending a farm. We're defending every family in this valley, every person these bastards would victimize. We do this right, we do it clean, and we do it permanent." In the distance, dust clouds rose as cartel forces assembled. They thought they were preparing to raid an old man's farm. Instead, they were walking into a trap laid by some of the most experienced combat veterans alive. The radio crackled. Shadow's voice was tight. "First wave moving out. ETA 20 minutes. "Copy that," Wade replied, signaling to his team. "Remember, let them get comfortable. Let them think they have the advantage. Then we show them what real soldiers can do." The transformation of Wade's farm into a fortress happened with surgical precision. Every fence post became a sensor, every drainage ditch a potential fighting position. Raven worked his demolitions magic, turning innocent-looking farm equipment into carefully placed charges that could flip an armored vehicle. "Remember Fallujah?" Knox asked, setting up his third sniper nest. Each position covered a different approach, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "That time we turned their own neighborhood against them." "Simple principles," Wade replied, checking the camouflage. "Use the environment, make them fight blind, turn their strengths into weaknesses." Shadow's voice crackled over their secure comms. "Movement at the tree line, three-man team tactical gear, look professional." Wade watched through his thermal scope as the cartel's advance team tried to infiltrate his perimeter. Their movement was good, low crawl, proper spacing, using natural cover, but they were reading the terrain wrong, seeing a simple farm instead of a prepared battlefield. "They're following the fence line," Knox reported, "walking right into funnel." "Point 3, let them," Wade ordered. "First lessons free." The cartel team hit Raven's first surprise, a modified irrigation pipe that suddenly sprayed them with ice-cold water. Not lethal, not even harmful, but shocking enough to make them break formation and reveal their positions. "Got them," Knox said calmly. His rifle cracked 3 times, warning shots kicking up dirt inches from their feet. The message was clear: they could have been kills. The cartel team retreated in disarray, their professional demeanor shattered. They'd expected to find blind spots in a farmer's security. Instead, they'd walked into a masterclass in defensive warfare. "Second team approaching from the south," Shadow reported. "These ones are better, using electronic countermeasures, trying to jam our comms." Wade smiled. "Switch to frequency set Delta. Let them think they've blinded us." This team was indeed more sophisticated. They moved like special forces, using proper tactical spacing and electronic warfare gear. But they'd made a crucial mistake, assuming they were dealing with civilian security systems. "Remember that trick from Baghdad?" Wade asked Shadow. "The one that made their own equipment betray them?" "Already on it," Shadow grinned, his fingers flying over his keyboard. 3, 2, 1... The cartel team's expensive jamming equipment suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree, broadcasting their exact positions. Their own technology had become a beacon pointing right at them. "Message received," Knox reported, watching through his scope as the second team made a hasty withdrawal. "They're calling into their command, switching to encrypted channels, which we broke an hour ago," Shadow added. "They're requesting permission to bring in their heavy weapons team. Seems we've got them spooked." Wade watched the sun setting over his property. The real attack would come soon, but these preliminary skirmishes served a purpose. Every probe revealed more about their enemy's capabilities, while showing only fragments of their own. Sarah's truck appeared at the perimeter, using the recognition signal they'd taught her. Wade met her at the gate. "Entire town's talking," she said, her voice low. "Cartel's bringing in everything they have, at least 50 men, heavy weapons, even helicopter support." "Good," Wade replied. "Means they're taking us seriously." "That's good?" Sarah looked at him like he was crazy. "Means they'll come in force, following standard military doctrine, and that's exactly what we've prepared for." A black SUV appeared briefly on the main road, conducting last-minute reconnaissance. Wade let them look. Let them see the quiet farm, the seeming lack of defenses. Let them think they understood what they were attacking. "Sarah," Wade said quietly, "get everyone you can to leave the valley tonight. Things are about to get complicated." As darkness fell, Wade gathered his team for final preparations. Each man checked his equipment with the calm precision that came from decades of combat experience. "They'll come in waves," Wade explained. "First wave will be their expendables, testing our defenses. Second wave will be their professionals, looking for patterns in how we respond. Third wave will be their elite, led by El Coyote himself. And we let them come," Knox finished, understanding the strategy. "Let each wave think they've learned from the previous one's mistakes. Until they realize," Raven added, "that every lesson we've taught them was wrong." The night was young, and these old soldiers were about to remind the cartel why some legends never die. El Coyote slammed his fist on the command vehicle's hood, staring at the thermal imaging feeds. 3 reconnaissance teams had gone in. 3 teams had been forced to retreat, their sophisticated equipment rendered useless, their tactics countered, before they could execute them. "Who are we dealing with?" he demanded, switching to rapid-fire Spanish. "This is no farmer. These are professional military responses." Back at the farm, Wade watched through Shadow's hacked feed as the cartel commanders argued. Their frustration was evident. They'd lost the initiative, and they knew it. "They're adapting," Knox reported from his elevated position. "Next wave's gearing up. Different approach. Multiple simultaneous points of entry. Synchronized assault teams." "Good," Wade replied. "Let them think complexity is the answer." Shadows. Surveillance picked up intense activity at the cartel staging area. Teams gearing up with night vision, breaching equipment, even portable anti-surveillance devices. "Getting expensive out there," Raven observed. "That's Russian military-grade ECM gear. These boys aren't playing anymore." Wade's phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Police scanners going crazy. State police tactical units mobilizing, but someone high up ordered them to stand down." "You're on your own. Aren't we always?" Knox muttered. The cartel's next probe was indeed more sophisticated. Multiple teams moving in parallel, using terrain features Wade's earlier opponents had avoided. Their formation was perfect, their timing precise. "Here we go," Wade said calmly. "Shadow, implement Protocol Echo." Suddenly, the cartel team's expensive night vision equipment picked up phantom heat signatures everywhere. False targets appeared and disappeared, making it impossible to distinguish real threats from electronic ghosts. "What the hell?" One team, leader's frustrated voice came over their compromised comms. "These are military-grade countermeasures." Falling back to secondary approach, another team reported, only to find their planned route blocked by a precisely placed piece of farm. Equipment that hadn't been there minutes before. "Getting slow in your old age," Knox commented as Wade returned from the lightning-fast equipment placement. "Took you almost 30 seconds. Some of us can't just lie around playing with scopes all day." Wade shot back, their old banter masking the deadly, serious game they were playing. El Coyote's voice cut through the radio chatter, cold and controlled. "Enough games. Bring up the heavy weapons. We do this the hard way." The sound of helicopter rotors thundered in the distance. On the thermal feeds, armored vehicles began moving into position. "Now that's just rude," Raven said, checking his detonator triggers. "Bringing armor to a farm fight." Shadow's laptop chirped with multiple alerts. "They're flooding all frequencies with jamming signals, trying to blanket the whole spectrum." "Right on schedule," Wade replied. "Initiate blackout protocol. Across the valley." Every electronic device the cartel was using suddenly went dark. Their communications, their tactical gear, even their vehicle systems, all dead. How the hell did they do that? El Coyote's voice was barely controlled rage as his men scrambled to restore their equipment. "Let me introduce you to the ghost of operations past," Shadow murmured, his fingers dancing across his keyboard. On every cartel commander's phone, a simple message appeared. "Last warning. Leave the valley. You are not prepared for what comes next." The response was predictable. El Coyote ordered an immediate full assault. No more probing attacks, no more careful reconnaissance. Pure force against what he assumed was a small team of operators. "Multiple vehicle columns," Knox reported. "They're coming from all directions. At least 50 men, heavy weapons, armor support." Wade checked his watch. The timing was perfect. Night had fully fallen, and the cartel was committed to exactly the kind of attack they'd prepared for. "Remember," he told his team, "we're not trying to win a battle here. We're teaching them why some places aren't worth taking." The first explosions lit up the night as Raven's carefully placed charges began reshaping the battlefield. The war for Thunder Valley was about to begin in earnest, and these old soldiers were ready to remind the world why they'd once been legendary. "Well, Knox," said chambering around, "guess retirement really was getting boring anyway." The cartel's assault began with a thunderous display of force. 50 caliber rounds tore through the night, their tracers painting deadly lines across Wade's property. The helicopter gunship spotlight swept the farm, searching for defenders, who'd already melted into carefully prepared positions. "Someone's been watching too many action movies," Knox commented, his voice calm in their earpieces. Through his scope, he counted 12 vehicles in the first wave alone. "They're trying to shock and awe a Delta Force team." "Their first mistake," Wade replied from his concealed position. "Shadow, how's their command and control?" "Arrogant, broadcasting in the clear. They think their numbers make them invincible." Wade watched the cartel forces advance. Their formation was textbook, too textbook. They were fighting the way they'd been trained, not adapting to the terrain that had been prepared for their defeat. "Remember Damascus?" Wade asked. "Sometimes the best ambush is letting them think they're winning." The cartel's front line reached the first checkpoint. Their point man was good, checking for tripwires, scanning for obvious threats. But he missed the real danger, the fact that they were being allowed to advance at all. "They're in position," Raven reported. "All units in the kill zone." Wade waited 3 more seconds, letting the entire first wave commit to their advance. "Execute Pattern Alpha." The night erupted in controlled chaos. Raven's charges detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to channel. The explosions cut off. Their retreat separated units from each other, created confusion without casualties. "What the hell?" El Coyote's voice crackled over their compromised comms. "Where's the return fire? Where are they?" That was the beauty of it. Wade's team hadn't fired a shot yet. The cartel forces were being beaten by their own panic, their own confusion. "Second wave moving up," Knox reported. "These ones look more professional. Mexican Special Forces patches." "Time to remind them why we were the teachers, not the students," Wade replied. "Execute Pattern Bravo." The real assault began with surgical precision. Knox's rifle spoke 3 times. 3 vehicle engines died, cutting off the second waves. "Advance!" Shadow's electronic warfare suite killed their night vision, thermal imaging and communications simultaneously. "They're everywhere!" a cartel soldier screamed in Spanish. "We're surrounded!" They weren't, but Wade's team had mastered the art of appearing omnipresent. Every time the cartel forces regrouped, they found their new position already covered. Every attempt to maneuver was met with precise fire that forced them back. "Getting sloppy now," Knox observed. The cartel's disciplined formation was breaking down. Units fired at shadows, wasting ammunition. Their sophisticated equipment, rendered useless, became a hindrance rather than a help. El Coyote's voice cut through the chaos, still controlled, but edged with something new: uncertainty. "Fall back to Rally Point Charlie. Regroup for..." His voice cut off as Shadow killed their remaining communications. In the sudden silence, the cartel forces found themselves isolated, disconnected, fighting blind against an enemy they couldn't see. "Now," Wade commanded, "show them why they call us ghosts." His team moved like shadows through their own battlefield. Years of working together meant they barely needed communications. Each man knew exactly where the others would be, exactly what they would do. Wade took down 3 cartel soldiers with hand-to-hand techniques before they realized he was there. Knox's rifle eliminated any heavy weapons team that tried to set up. Raven's precisely placed charges herded the enemy exactly where they wanted them. "Boss," Shadow called out, "helicopter's making another run." The gunship roared overhead, its spotlight searching frantically for targets. Wade smiled. They'd prepared for this too. "Remember what we learned in Morocco?" he asked. "About flying blind?" The next time the helicopter swept low, it found its spotlight reflected back by dozens of carefully placed mirrors. The pilot, momentarily blinded, pulled up sharply. That's when Knox's shot took out his main rotor control with surgical precision. "Happy landing," Knox muttered as the pilot fought to maintain control, finally retreating with his wounded aircraft. The cartel's first major assault had been beaten back without Wade's team taking a single casualty. But more importantly, they'd done it in a way that multiplied the psychological impact. "Status report," Wade called out. 23 tangos, combat ineffective," Knox replied. "No kills, just a lot of people reconsidering their career choices." "Their equipment's gone," Shadow added. "Night vision fried, communications dead, vehicles disabled. They're fighting with rifles and flashlights now." "Like the general said in Kandahar," Raven commented. "Sometimes the best victory is making the enemy defeat themselves." Wade watched the cartel forces retreat in disarray. Their confident assault turned into a confused withdrawal. But he knew this was just the beginning. El Coyote hadn't survived this long by giving up easily. "They'll be back," he told his team. "Next time with everything they've got. No more testing our defenses. No more probing attacks." "Good," Knox replied, the smile evident in his voice. "Was getting tired of playing gentle. The night was still young, and these old soldiers were just getting warmed up." Beneath Wade's weathered barn, 20 feet underground, lay a command center that would have impressed the Pentagon. Steel-reinforced walls, backup power systems, and enough supplies to withstand a month-long siege. This wasn't paranoia. It was experience. "They're regrouping," Shadow reported, his bank of monitors showing thermal images of the cartel forces. El Coyotes called in reinforcements. Intercepted communications suggest they're bringing in their elite tactical unit. "Los Fantasmas." "The Ghosts," Wade translated, studying the tactical display. "Ironic." Knox cleaned his rifle with practiced precision, never taking his eyes off his sector. "Heard of them. Ex-Mexican special forces, specialized in high-risk operations. They're good." "We're better," Raven replied, checking his demolitions triggers. "And we've got a few surprises they haven't seen yet." Wade moved to a concealed panel in the wall, entering a complex code. The wall slid aside, revealing his personal armory, not just weapons, but specialized equipment gathered from decades of classified operations. "Remember that sonic weapon we used in Venezuela?" he asked, pulling out a sophisticated-looking device. "The one that made an entire compound's security forces think they were going crazy?" Raven grinned. "Still have nightmares about that sound. You've been holding out on us, boss." "Got a few other toys, too," Wade said, revealing more equipment. "Thermal scramblers from the Moscow operation, electronic warfare suite from Singapore, things even our own government doesn't know exist." Shadow's computers chirped with new alerts. El Coyote's changed tactics. They're setting up a proper military-style operation now. Command and control structure, specialized units, even bringing in their own electronic warfare team. "Good," Wade replied. "Means they'll be predictable. Professional soldiers follow patterns we can exploit." He activated the farm's secondary defense grid, Across the property, hidden systems hummed to life. Every fence post contained sensors that could detect approaching forces. Every drainage ditch concealed sophisticated countermeasures. "This isn't just a farm," Wade explained. "It's a testing ground. Every new tactic, every piece of equipment we acquired, I built this place to be the ultimate defensive position." Knox moved to the tactical display, studying the terrain overlays. "Those irrigation pipes, they're not just for show, are they?" "Underground tunnel network," Wade confirmed. "Lets us move anywhere on the property without being seen. The grain silos, hardened fighting positions with clear fields of fire. Even the scarecrow in the south field has a purpose. That's why you chose this place," Raven realized. "Perfect natural terrain for defense, enhanced by years of careful preparation." Shadow's monitoring equipment picked up new movement. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Different formation this time. Professional spacing. Proper. Tactical intervals. Wade watched the thermal signatures advance. Los Fantasmas lived up to their reputation. Their movement was precise, their approach methodical. They weren't making the mistakes of the previous assault. "They're probing our perimeter with drones," Shadow reported. "High-end stuff, military grade." "Show them what we learned in Damascus," Wade ordered, "about making technology work against itself." Shadow's fingers flew across his keyboard. The cartel's drones suddenly detected hundreds of false heat signatures, making it impossible to distinguish real targets from electronic ghosts. "Getting frustrated now?" Shadow commented, monitoring their communications. "They've never seen countermeasures like this. They think they're dealing with government-level opposition." "They're not wrong," Knox said. "Most of this gear isn't supposed to exist." Wade moved to the barn's upper level, Atlas at his side. Through his advanced optics, he could see El Coyote's forces assembling for their next assault. Their equipment was impressive. Armored vehicles, heavy weapons even. Some hardware that had obviously been stolen from military bases. "They're bringing everything they have," he told his team. "No more test runs, no more probing attacks. This time they come with everything." "How many?" Raven asked. "Thermal shows at least 80 combatants," Shadow replied. "Plus vehicles, air, support, and enough firepower to level the county." Wade smiled grimly. "Then it's time to show them why some legends are better left alone. Activate all defensive systems. Implementation protocol Echo." Across the property, hidden weapons emerged from innocent-looking farm equipment. Automated defense systems powered up. Years of preparation were about to pay off. "Remember," Wade told his team, "we're not just defending a farm. We're teaching them why some targets aren't worth taking." The night was about to become very educational for El Coyote and his forces. Shadow's voice cut through the pre-dawn silence. "We've got a problem. Someone's broadcasting from inside the valley." Wade moved to the monitoring station, studying the signal patterns. "Location? Thompson's old place. New family that moved." In last month, Shadow's fingers flew across his keyboard. "They're good, using burst transmissions, encrypted channels, but they're not good enough." "The Millers," Sarah's voice crackled over their secure line, "showed up 3 weeks ago. Said they were running from debt collectors. Been asking questions all over town about the farm, about Wade." Wade had noticed them, of course he had. The way they moved, the subtle signs of tactical training beneath their civilian facade. He'd been waiting to see their play. "They're coordinating with El Coyote's forces," Shadow confirmed, decrypting their transmissions, sending detailed intel about our defenses, community patterns, potential weak points. "More importantly," Knox added from his observation post, "they've got eyes on our southern approach. The one route we were counting on staying secret." Wade processed this development with cold efficiency. The cartel was smarter than they'd given them credit for, placing sleeper agents ahead of time, building a complete intelligence picture. "Sarah," he called over the radio, "how many locals have the Millers talked to?" "Half the town. They're friendly, asking casual questions, building relationships. Sarah's voice carried professional appreciation. It's good tradecraft. Too good. Wade pulled up the property maps. They're not just gathering intel. They're mapping escape routes, rally points, identifying anyone who might help us. Raven's voice joined the conversation. We've got movement. 3-man team leaving the Miller place, headed for the North Ridge, carrying something. Through thermal imaging, Wade watched the team move with professional precision. Their casual civilian disguise had vanished, replaced by practiced tactical movement. They're setting up an observation post, Knox reported. Perfect position to direct artillery. Fire. Give them an hour. They could walk rounds right through our defensive positions. Wade had planned for external threats, but internal enemies required a different approach. Direct confrontation would alert El Coyote that they'd been compromised. Shadow, show me the Miller family's background. The documents appeared on screen. Imperfect cover identities. Too perfect. These aren't cartel, Wade realized. They're private military contractors. Probably ex-CIA or Delta themselves. That's why their tradecraft is so good. What's the play, boss? Raven asked. Can't let them keep broadcasting. Wade smiled grimly. We use their own strategy against them. Sarah, remember that story we created about the valley's water supply? The one about chemical contamination from old military testing? Already spread. It at the diner this morning. Perfect, Shadow. Let them intercept some traffic about emergency evacuations, soil samples, CDC involvement. Understanding dawned in Knox's voice. Make them think they've stumbled onto something bigger than a tactical operation. Exactly. Shadow, start broadcasting encrypted medical codes. Make it look like we're trying to hide a containment breach. The plan worked with beautiful precision. Within an hour, the observation team was pulling back, their movements showing clear signs of urgency. They're taking the bait, Shadow reported, monitoring their transmissions, sending emergency messages to El Coyote about possible chemical weapons exposure, CDC containment protocols. Now the complicated part, Wade said. We need to neutralize their capabilities without letting El Coyote know we're onto them. The solution came from an unexpected source. Sarah's voice carried a smile. Already handled, anonymous tip to the FBI about potential terrorist cells in the valley. Funny thing about those perfect cover identities, they draw a lot of attention when the right people start looking. Within hours, federal agents were quietly evacuating the Miller family for questioning. Their observation posts were compromised, their intelligence network cut off, and El Coyote had no idea his advance team had been neutralized. Clean, Knox commented appreciatively. No shots fired, no alert raised, and El Coyote still thinks his intel team is in place. Which means, Wade added, he'll trust their last report about our southern approach being vulnerable. He'll commit his forces exactly where we want them. Shadow's monitors showed the cartel forces adjusting their positions, preparing to exploit what they thought was solid intelligence. Sometimes, Wade told his team, the best way to handle infiltrators is to let them think they've succeeded, right up until that success becomes their biggest mistake. The sun rose over Thunder Valley, illuminating another layer of Wade's defense strategy. El Coyote thought he had inside information about the farm's vulnerabilities. Instead, he was falling into an even more sophisticated trap. Shadow's monitoring equipment erupted with alerts at midnight. Multiple convoys approaching from 3 directions. This is it. They're throwing everything they have at us. Wade studied the tactical display, watching red dots converge on their position. The cartel's full strength was impressive. Over 100 men, armored vehicles, even helicopter gunships borrowed from corrupt military officials. El Coyote's changed his pattern, Knox reported from his elevated position. They're moving in tactical squadrons now, former Mexican special forces leading each unit. These aren't thugs with guns anymore. Good, Wade replied. Professionals are predictable. Amateurs are dangerous. The team gathered for final preparations, each man checking equipment that had kept them alive through countless missions. The Barnes Command Center hummed with defensive systems coming online. "Got eyes on their heavy weapons," Raven called in. 50 cal positions being set up on the ridge, mortars in the tree line. They're planning to soften us up before the main assault. Shadow intercepted their communications. El Coyote's addressing his men, telling them failure isn't an option. His reputation with the cartel leadership is on the line. His reputation should be the least of his concerns, Wade said, checking the farm's defensive grid one final time. Every approach was covered, every apparent weakness masking a trap. Years of preparation were about to pay off. "Remember Sarajevo?" Knox asked, adjusting his scope. "That time we made an entire mechanized brigade surrender without firing a shot?" "Similar principle," Wade confirmed. "Fear is a force multiplier. By dawn, they'll be defeating themselves." Sarah's voice crackled over their secure channel. "Town's clear. Got the last families out through the back roads. Sheriff Cooper's keeping his deputies away, just like you asked." "Good. No civilians in the crossfire. Shadow, show me their attack plan." The tactical display shifted, showing enemy positions in red. El Coyote had divided his forces into 3 major elements: a frontal assault team with armor support, flanking units using the terrain for cover, and a reserve force built around his elite Los Fantasmas operators. "He's learned from his mistakes," Wade observed. "Multiple assault vectors, synchronized timing, proper support elements, almost textbook." "Almost?" Raven asked, arming his final demolition charges. "He's still thinking conventionally, expecting us to fight like the soldiers we used to be." Wade smiled grimly. "Time to show him how we've evolved." The team moved to their positions, each man knowing this could be their last mission together. But there was no tension, no anxiety, just the calm readiness that came from decades of combat experience. "Shadow, initiate Protocol Omega. Let's give them something to think about." Across the valley, the cartel's electronic warfare systems suddenly detected multiple thermal signatures appearing and disappearing. Drone feeds showed phantom movements, making it impossible to confirm their tactical intelligence. "They're getting nervous," Shadow reported, monitoring their communications. "Los Fantasmas commander is warning El Coyote that something's wrong, says it feels like a trap." "Smart man," Knox commented. "Too bad his boss isn't listening." El Coyote's voice cut through their intercepted channels. "No more delays. Begin the artillery barrage. All units advance on my mark." The night erupted with the sound of heavy weapons as the cartel began their preparatory bombardment. Shells impacted across Wade's property, but found only empty fields and reinforced structures. "Remember," Wade told his team, "we're not just fighting for this farm. We're fighting for every family in this valley, every community these bastards would destroy. Make it count." The cartel forces began their advance, moving with professional precision through the artificially created gaps in the defensive fire. They thought they were exploiting weaknesses. Instead, they were walking into carefully prepared kill zones. "All units report ready," Shadow confirmed. Each team member was in position, their sectors of fire overlapping, their traps armed and waiting. Wade watched the enemy close in, remembering another night, another battle where his team had faced impossible odds. They'd won then by making their enemies defeat themselves. Tonight would be no different. "On my mark," he ordered, "show them why they call us ghosts." The night was about to become very long for El Coyote and his men. By dawn, they would learn why some legends are best left alone, why some soldiers never really retire, and why this quiet farm in Thunder Valley was about to become their worst nightmare. "One last dance," Knox said quietly, his rifle ready. "One last lesson," Wade corrected, "about why you don't threaten a Delta operator's home." The storm was about to break, and these old soldiers were ready to remind the world why they had once been the most feared unit in military history. The cartel's main assault began with overwhelming force. 50 caliber rounds stitched across Wade's property while mortar shells rained from the sky. 3 helicopter gunships swept in low, their spotlights cutting through the darkness as Coyote committed everything to this final attack. That's a lot of firepower for one old farmer, Knox commented dryly, watching through his scope as armored vehicles led the advance. Interesting choice of tactics, Wade replied from his command position. They're burning through ammunition at an unsustainable rate, almost like someone's been feeding them bad intel about our supplies. Shadow's voice carried a hint of pride. Amazing what people believe when they intercept what they think is secure communication. They think we've got a bunker full of arms and ammunition. The cartel forces moved with professional precision, their formation perfect for assaulting a heavily defended position. Too perfect, too predictable. They're following standard Mexican Special Forces doctrine, Wade observed, exactly like we expected. Shadow, initiate Echo Protocol. Suddenly, the cartel's sophisticated night vision equipment began showing impossible readings. Thermal signatures appeared and disappeared randomly. Radio communications filled with ghostly voices speaking in coded messages. What the hell is happening? El Coyote's voice crackled over their compromised comms. Where is the return fire? Why can't we get a fix on their positions? That was the beauty of it. Wade's team hadn't fired a shot yet. The cartel forces were fighting shadows, burning through their ammunition against phantoms. Multiple teams breaching the outer perimeter, Knox reported calmly, walking right into Killing Zone 3. Remember Damascus? Wade asked. How we made an entire Republican Guard unit surrender without firing a shot. Still think that was some of your best work, boss, Raven replied. Want to try for a new record? Wade watched the cartel forces advance deeper into his property. Every step they took was calculated, measured, exactly what he wanted them to do. They thought they were exploiting gaps in his defense. Instead, they were walking into the most sophisticated trap of their lives. All units halt, El Coyote suddenly ordered. Something's wrong. This is too easy. But it was too late. They'd committed their forces exactly where Wade wanted them. Now, he commanded, show them why they call us ghosts. The night erupted in carefully orchestrated chaos. Raven's charges detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to isolate. Unit after unit found themselves cut off, separated from support, their carefully planned assault turning into isolated pockets of confusion. The helicopter gunships swooped in, trying to provide support. That's when Knox's real skills came into play. 3 shots, 3 hydraulic systems disabled. The aircraft retreated, unable to maintain stable flight. Los Fantasmas moving to secondary positions, Shadow reported. Their commander's good. He recognizes a trap when he sees one. 2. Later matter, Wade replied. Initiate Sierra Protocol. Across the battlefield, the cartel's own equipment turned against them, their radio frequencies filled with false orders. GPS systems showed incorrect positions. Even their thermal imaging began displaying phantom signatures of a force 10 times larger than Wade's team. This is impossible. El Coyote's voice had lost its confidence. These are military-grade countermeasures. Who are we fighting? Wade's response was broadcast on all their frequencies. You wanted to know what happened to Phantom. Why the most decorated Delta Force operator disappeared. Welcome to my retirement plan. The psychological impact was immediate. The cartel forces had come expecting to overwhelm a small team of retired operators. Instead, they found themselves facing tactics and technology they'd only heard whispers about. Western sector breaking, Knox reported with professional satisfaction. Their heavy weapons teams are pulling back, losing unit cohesion. But El Coyote hadn't survived this long by giving up easily. Push forward, he commanded. They can't be everywhere at once. Actually, Wade replied on their channel, that's exactly what we can be. The team moved like ghosts through their own battlefield. Years of working together meant they barely needed communications. Each man knew exactly where the others would be, exactly what they would do. Wade himself seemed to materialize from nowhere, disabling 3 cartel operators with hand-to-hand techniques before vanishing again. Knox's rifle spoke with surgical precision, eliminating heavy weapons teams before they could set up. Raven's explosives herded enemy units exactly where they wanted them. "El Coyote's getting desperate," Shadow warned. "He's ordering Los Fantasmas to use their emergency protocols." "Good," Wade replied. "Let's show them why those protocols won't help." The elite cartel unit moved with impressive skill, using every trick they'd learned from their special forces training. But Wade's team had written half those protocols, and they knew every countermeasure. The night became a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The cartel's superior numbers meant nothing against opponents they couldn't find. Their advanced equipment became worse than useless as it fed them false information. Every attempt to regain initiative led them deeper into prepared killing zones. "Status report," Wade called out. 43 tangos combat ineffective, Knox replied. "No fatalities, just a lot of people reconsidering their career choices." "Their command and control is shattered," Shadow added. "Units are starting to act independently, losing coordination." "Primary objective achieved," Raven confirmed. "Their heavy weapons are neutralized or abandoned." Wade watched through his thermal imaging as El Coyote's massive assault force began to disintegrate. Not through superior firepower or direct confrontation, but through the careful application of psychology, technology, and decades of combat experience. "They're breaking," Knox reported. "Even Los Fantasmas is pulling back. Never seen an elite unit rattled like this." But Wade knew El Coyote had one more card to play. The cartel leader hadn't survived this long by accepting defeat. "All units regroup." El Coyote's voice held barely controlled fury. "Fall back to Rally Point Delta. We end this with our contingency plan." "Nuclear option," Shadow warned. "They're bringing up their reserve force, everything they've got left in one final push." Wade smiled grimly. They'd planned for this too. El Coyote was about to learn why some legends were better left alone, why some soldiers never really retired, and why threatening a Delta operator's home was the last mistake his cartel would ever make. "Remember what we used to say in Delta?" Wade asked his team. "The best weapon isn't the one you fire. It's the one you don't have to," they responded in unison. The night was about to become very educational for El Coyote and his forces. El Coyote's reserve force attacked with the desperation of men who knew failure meant death. Armored vehicles crashed through the farm's outer defenses while combat teams advanced under covering fire from their remaining heavy weapons. "There, not even trying to be subtle now," Knox reported, his rifle systematically disabling vehicle after vehicle. "Just throwing everything they have left at us." "Desperation makes men predictable," Wade replied, moving like a ghost through his own battlefield. Shadow. "How many still combat effective?" 28 hardcore remaining, mostly Los Fantasmas. They've switched to analog communications, trying to avoid our electronic warfare. Wade smiled grimly. They'd expected this too. In their world, going low-tech could be just as deadly as high-tech solutions. "Remember Serbia?" he asked his team, "when they thought cutting communications would give them an advantage?" "Still have nightmares about what you did to that mechanized brigade," Raven replied. "Want to try something similar?" "Execute Sierra Protocol," Wade commanded. "Show them why going dark is exactly what we wanted." Across the battlefield, carefully, placed speakers activated. The night filled with sounds, phantom movements, false radio chatter, the noise of a force far larger than Wade's team deploying for combat. The cartel forces found themselves fighting blind, unable to distinguish real threats from artificial ones. Every shadow might hide an operator. Every sound could mean death. "Western team is breaking formation," Knox reported with professional satisfaction. "They're shooting at their own shadows now." El Coyote's voice cut through their monitored frequencies. tight with controlled fury. Hold position! They're playing mind games. Los Fantasmas push through Sector 7. Find these ghosts. The elite unit moved with impressive skill, using every trick they'd learned from their special forces training. But they were fighting on Wade's territory against men who'd written half their tactical manuals. "They're good," Shadow observed. "Los Fantasmas' commander is trying to triangulate our positions based on sound patterns." "Better than good," Wade agreed. "But we're better. Raven, show them why they call this Thunder Valley." Multiple explosions chained across the property, each one precisely calculated. Not to kill or maim, but to disorient, to confuse, to make the very ground seem alive beneath the cartel forces' feet. Los Fantasmas found their careful advance turned into chaos. Every time they adapted to one type of threat, Wade's team changed. The rules of engagement. They were fighting ghosts who seemed to anticipate their every move. "El Coyote's pulling back to his command vehicle," Shadow reported. "Thermal shows him gathering his remaining officers." "He's figuring it out," Wade said, "starting to understand what he's really fighting. Knox, discourage any heroic last stands." The sniper's rifle spoke 3 times. 3 officers dropped, their wounds painful but non-lethal. The message was clear. They could have been kills. "Status update," Wade called out as he moved to his next position. 17 still combat effective, Knox replied. "But they're not fighting as a unit anymore. Every man for himself. Command and control completely broken," Shadow added. "They're reverting to basic training, trying to fall back to rally points we've already compromised." Wade watched through his thermal imaging as El Coyote's massive assault force dissolved into individual survival efforts. The cartel leader's voice had gone quiet, probably realizing that every transmission revealed more about his position. "They're breaking," Raven confirmed. "Even Los Fantasmas is pulling back. Never seen an elite unit rattled like this." But Wade knew better than to celebrate early. Wounded animals were the most dangerous, and El Coyote hadn't survived this long by giving up easily. "Stay alert," he warned his team. "This isn't over. El Coyote's got one more card to play. He's not leaving here without his reputation intact." As if confirming his words, new movement appeared on their thermal feeds. El Coyote was consolidating his remaining forces for one final desperate assault. "Here it comes," Wade told his team. "The part where they think throwing everything they have left into one massive push will overwhelm us." "Just like old times," Knox replied, the smile evident in his voice. "Want to show them why that never works?" Wade moved to his final position, checking his equipment one last time. They'd trained for this, prepared for this moment when desperation would make their opponents predictable. "Remember," he told his team, "we're not just defending a farm. We're teaching them why some targets aren't worth taking, why some legends are better left alone." The night was about to become very educational for El Coyote and his remaining forces. El Coyote's voice crackled over their intercepted communications, all pretense of calm professionalism gone. "No more games. Everyone forward. I want these ghosts found and eliminated." "Someone's losing their tactical composure," Knox observed, watching through his scope as the remaining cartel forces consolidated into one massive assault group. "They're abandoning all their training," Wade replied, "falling back on brute force. Shadow, what's their strength?" 23 combatants still effective, including El Coyote's personal security detail. They're stripping equipment from their disabled vehicles, going heavy on firepower. The cartel forces had indeed changed tactics. Instead of coordinated small unit movements, they were massing for one overwhelming push. Every remaining fighter carried multiple weapons, loaded down with enough ammunition to fight a small war. "Look familiar?" Wade asked his team. "Remember Kandahar, when they thought overwhelming firepower would solve everything?" "Same mistake," Raven confirmed. "They think if they can't outthink us, they can outgun us." El Coyote had positioned himself at the center of his formation, protected by his most loyal fighters. His voice carried across the battlefield as he rallied his men. There are only 4 of them, 4 old men playing soldier. Show them what real killers can do. Interesting choice of words, Wade commented. Shadow, implement Delta Protocol. Let's show them the difference between killers and soldiers. Across the battlefield, Wade's sophisticated defense system activated its final configurations. Every shadow became a potential threat, every sound a possible attack vector. The very ground seemed to come alive beneath the cartel forces' feet. They're moving, Knox reported. Full advance across all sectors, no subtlety, just maximum firepower. The night erupted in a storm of gunfire as the cartel forces unleashed everything they had. Tracer rounds lit up the darkness, heavy weapons pounding. Suspected positions. They were trying to suppress any possible resistance through sheer volume of fire. Ammunition expenditure is massive, Shadow calculated. At this rate, they'll be dry in 3 minutes. They know that, Wade replied. This is their version of a Hail Mary. If it doesn't work, they've got nothing left. The cartel advance was impressive in its fury, if not its tactics. They moved as one mass, each man firing continuously, trying to overwhelm any defense through pure firepower. Getting closer to the barn, Raven warned, starting to look like they might actually breach the outer perimeter. Good, Wade responded. Let them think it's working. Let them commit fully to the advance. El Coyote's voice carried triumph as his forces pushed forward. See, they're breaking. The ghosts are falling back. But Wade's team wasn't falling back. They were executing a plan that had been years in the making. Every apparent retreat was positioning, every seeming vulnerability a carefully laid trap. Remember what we learned in Special Forces? Wade asked his team. About the difference between looking strong and being strong? The more strength they show, Knox quoted, the more desperate they actually are. The cartel force reached the apparently abandoned barn, their massive volume of fire having suppressed any visible resistance. El Coyote's voice carried victory. The barn is ours. Find them. Burn them out. Now, Raven asked, his finger hovering over his detonator. Not yet, Wade replied. Let them feel safe first. Let them think they've won. The cartel fighters began, spreading out, securing their apparent victory. Their fire slackened as they started searching for their opponents, confidence replacing desperation. They're perfect, Knox reported. Completely committed, fully exposed, and running low on ammunition. Wade watched through his thermal imaging as the last elements of El Coyote's force moved into position. They had abandoned all pretense of tactical awareness, focused entirely on their imagined victory. Shadow, begin final countdown, Wade ordered. Remember everyone, non-lethal takedowns only. We're not here to create martyrs. 10 seconds to implementation, Shadow confirmed. In the barn, El Coyote was already calling in his victory to his cartel superiors, describing how he had defeated the legendary ghosts. Ready to teach them the difference between victory and trap? Wade asked his team. Born ready, came the unified response. The night was about to remind El Coyote why some legends survive for a reason, and why underestimating old soldiers was a mistake you only made once. Execute! Wade's command was quiet, almost gentle, but its effect was anything but. The barn, seemingly conquered by El Coyote's forces, transformed into a tactical nightmare. Every shadow concealed a surprise, every corner held a trap. The lights died, plunging the cartel fighters into total darkness. What's happening? El Coyote demanded, as his night vision equipment suddenly failed. Where are they? Everywhere. Wade's voice seemed to come from all directions at once. Shadow's sophisticated audio system making it impossible to locate the source. And nowhere, just like a phantom should be, the attack came from all directions simultaneously. Raven's carefully placed charges detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to disorient. Dense smoke filled the barn, but this was no ordinary cover. It was chemically treated to defeat thermal imaging. Going dark, Knox reported, his rifle systematically eliminating weapon lights and tactical lasers with precision shots. "They're fighting blind now." El Coyote's men began firing wildly, their professional discipline shattered by an enemy they couldn't see or fight. Their own muzzle flashes became their worst enemy, temporarily blinding them while revealing their positions. "Status?" Wade asked, moving like a ghost through his own battlefield. 17 tangos still active," Shadow replied. "But they're not fighting as a unit anymore. Complete tactical breakdown." Wade struck without warning, appearing beside 2 cartel fighters. His hand-to-hand techniques were precise, efficient. Decades of combat experience distilled into movements that disabled, without killing. Both men were down before they realized what hit them. El Coyote's moving toward the back exit, Knox reported, taking his personal guard with him. "Looks like he's figured out he's in over his head." "Not yet, he hasn't," Wade replied. "Shadow, implement Echo Protocol." The barn speakers came alive with the sounds of a massive force deploying for combat. To the panicked cartel fighters, it seemed like an entire military unit was surrounding them. "This is impossible." El Coyote's voice had lost its authority, edged now with fear. "There were only supposed to be 4 of them." "Shows what bad intel and can do," Raven commented, triggering another series of disorienting charges. "Maybe next time do better research before threatening a Delta operator's home." Wade moved through the chaos like water, each movement calculated and precise. 3 more cartel fighters went down to hand-to-hand techniques before they could even raise their weapons. The legendary Phantom was living up to his name. "Western sector clear," Knox reported. 9 tangos down, all breathing, all regretting their career choices. "Eastern sector secured," Raven added. "Got 5 more zip-tied and contemplating their life decisions." El Coyote found himself isolated with his last 3 guards, backed into a corner of his own making. His sophisticated weapons were useless against an enemy he couldn't find, his tactical training meaningless against opponents who seemed to bend the rules of reality. "Who are you people?" he demanded, his voice betraying his fear. Wade's response came from directly behind him. "Just a farmer protecting his home, with a little help from some old friends." El Coyote spun, firing on instinct, but Wade was already gone, a ghost that struck without warning and vanished without trace. His guards went down in rapid succession, precise strikes eliminating their ability to fight without causing permanent damage. "It's over," Wade's voice echoed through the barn. "Your men are down, your operation is finished, and you're about to learn why some legends are better left alone." El Coyote, the feared cartel commander who had terrorized 3 countries, found himself alone in the darkness, facing an enemy he couldn't see or fight. "You can't win this," he snarled, trying to maintain his bravado. "The cartel will send others, more men, more weapons." "Let them come," Wade replied, materializing from the shadows. "Give them my regards. Tell them what happened when they threatened the wrong farmer." The last thing El Coyote saw before unconsciousness claimed him was Wade's slight smile, the same expression he'd worn when they first met, when they thought he was just another aging rancher they could intimidate. "All targets neutralized," Shadow confirmed. "No fatalities, minimal permanent injuries, just a lot of bruised bodies and wounded pride." "And valuable lessons learned," Wade added, surveying the results of their operation. "About respecting retirement, leaving old soldiers alone, and why some farms are better left untouched." The night's silence was broken only by the groans of defeated cartel fighters, each one a testament to the difference between mere violence and true military expertise. Dawn broke over Thunder Valley, revealing the full extent of the night's battle. Disabled vehicles dotted Wade's property, testament to precision rather than destruction. 23 captured cartel fighters sat zip-tied in groups, watched over by Knox, while Shadow documented everything. "Final count?" Wade asked, surveying the aftermath. 23 prisoners, including El Coyote and his command staff, Shadow reported. All alive, all with non-lethal injuries, plus about $8 million in seized vehicles and equipment. Wade nodded, checking his watch. Law enforcement ETA. State police tactical units are 20 minutes out, Shadow confirmed. FBI about an hour behind them. They're very interested in the gift we're about to give them. El Coyote, secured but conscious, watched Wade with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. You could have killed us all. Why didn't you? Dead men don't carry messages, Wade replied, checking the prisoner's restraints. But you will. About what? Happens when cartels threaten the wrong valley, try to take the wrong farm. Raven approached, his demo gear packed away. Property's clear. All charges recovered or detonated safely. Apart from some cosmetic damage to the barn, place looks almost normal. That was the point, Wade said. Tomorrow this goes back to being just another Montana farm. Nothing to see, nothing to fear. Unless you know better. Sarah's truck appeared on the horizon, leading a convoy of returning families. The valley's evacuation had been so smooth, so practiced, that the cartel never realized the civilian absence. Was part of Wade's plan. Town's talking already, she reported, joining them. Stories about ghosts in the night, about an entire cartel force defeated by shadows. Nobody quite believes it, but everybody knows something happened. Let them talk, Wade replied. Sometimes legends are more effective than facts. The first police sirens echoed through the valley. Sheriff Cooper's convoy arrived first, 4 patrol cars and 2 tactical units. The sheriff stepped out, taking in the scene with professional assessment. Jesus Christ, Wade, Cooper breathed. When you said you could handle it. Had some help from old friends. Wade gestured to his team, who were maintaining professional distance while securing the scene. These gentlemen need processing. Might want to call for more transport. Cooper walked the perimeter, noting the precision of the operation. Every captured weapon was documented, every prisoner's injuries professionally treated. This wasn't just a victory, it was an evidence package gift-wrapped for prosecution. Your FBI friends will be particularly interested in this bunch, Wade added. They're part of the group that's been terrorizing the valley, the ones you could never touch because you could never prove anything. Cooper keyed his radio, calling for ambulances. His deputies began processing the scene, their expressions a mix of professional duty and barely concealed amazement. Every cartel member was alive, injured in precise non-lethal ways that spoke of extraordinary skill. Your guests have been busy, Cooper noted, examining ID cards and weapons. Mexican Special Forces gear, high-end communications equipment, military-grade weapons. This is bigger than we thought. Check the barn, Wade suggested. Found some interesting paperwork. Might help with your other investigations. Shadow had planted the intelligence carefully. Documents linking the cartel to local crimes, property seizures and accidents that had plagued the valley. Enough evidence to unravel their entire operation. El Coyote watched the law enforcement activity with cold eyes. This changes nothing. The cartel will do exactly what we tell them, Wade cut him off. Because if they don't, next time we won't be so gentle. Imagine what we could do if we actually wanted to kill people. FBI vehicles began arriving, serious-looking agents in tactical gear, evidence response teams, and senior investigators. Wade noted their approach patterns, their weapon handling. These weren't desk jockeys. They'd sent their A-team. Mr. Thorne, a female agent, approached, her badge identifying her as Special Agent Sarah Martinez. We're going to need a statement about what happened here. Pretty simple, really, Wade replied, maintaining his farmer persona. They came to take my farm. I defended my property. Martinez's eyes swept the battlefield with military precision. Multiple disabled vehicles, wounded suspects, showing consistent non-lethal injury patterns, and enough evidence to take down their entire regional operation. That's quite a night's work for one farmer. Grew up hunting, Wade shrugged. Got lucky. The sun climbed higher, illuminating a victory that would never make the official records, at least not the true version. But that was fine with Wade and his team. Some stories were better left as legends, whispered about in cartel safe houses, as warnings about quiet farms and retired soldiers who were better left alone. A week after the battle, Thunder Valley showed subtle but significant changes. The Henderson family had returned to their farm. Miller's place was being repaired. The fear that had gripped the community was replaced by a quiet confidence. Wade stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. Atlas lay at his feet, ever vigilant. The farm looked perfectly normal again. Every trace of the battle erased, every system concealed. Just the way he wanted it. Interesting morning briefing, Shadow reported, approaching with his laptop. Cartels pulling out completely. Not just here. They're abandoning operations in 3 states. Seems our message was received. Amazing. What happens when you change someone's risk calculation? Wade replied. Knox emerged from the barn, his rifle case packed. Surveillance shows no unusual activity for 50 miles. Valley's clean. Time to go home then, Wade said, but Knox shook. His head. Been thinking about that. The sniper looked across the valley. That old Wilson place is for sale. Good sight lines, excellent property for a shooting range. Valley could use a proper firearms instructor. Raven joined them, wiping grease from his hands. Miller's looking to sell his mechanical shop too. Always wanted to run a legitimate business, and the clinic needs a new doctor, Shadow added, one who knows how to handle unique medical situations. Wade smiled, understanding what wasn't being said. His team wasn't leaving. They were putting down roots, creating a network of protection that would make the valley permanently secure. Sarah's truck approached, no longer carrying the tension of past visits. Town meeting was interesting, she reported. People are talking about forming a community watch program. Sheriff Cooper's supportive. Good communities protect themselves, Wade replied. That's not all, Sarah continued. Those cartel properties going up for auction. Local families are bidding. Valley's taking itself back. Wade watched another sunrise. Paint the Montana sky. The cartel had thought they were attacking a single farm, defended by a handful of retired soldiers. Instead, they'd run into something far more powerful, a community that had learned to protect itself. You know, Sarah said thoughtfully, people are already telling stories about ghosts in the night, about how the valley itself fought back against evil. Nobody quite believes it, but sometimes legends are better protection than guns. Wade finished. Sometimes the best defense is making sure nobody wants to test your defenses at all. His team dispersed to their positions, no longer preparing for battle, but maintaining the quiet vigilance that would keep their homes safe. They'd spent their lives fighting in foreign lands, conducting operations that would never see official records. Now they had a different mission, protecting this piece of America they'd claimed as their own. Atlas barked once, alerting Wade to movement on the road. But it was just Old Man Henderson's truck, heading out to check his cattle. Normal morning activity in a valley that looked perfectly ordinary, unless you knew exactly what watched over it. Wade smiled, sipping his coffee. Sometimes the best. Victories weren't the ones you won with violence, but the ones that prevented violence from ever returning. Thunder Valley was safe now, protected not just by former Delta operators, but by the power of community and the whispered legends of what happened to those who threatened it. Just another quiet morning on just another Montana farm, exactly the way he wanted it.